the part of hip hop and music that the white internet loved hadn't like grown to popularity at this time.
That's true.
No, it's true. It's like white people hadn't, taken their stake on the internet in terms of music and deciding what was popular. Like they were late to the party in a sense because it's like, I think because he's a white rapper, so much of the center of black hip hop ignored him. When it's like if the white internet had like, got their bearings in 2014, like Mac Miller is probably one of the best selling artists out right now.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
Very true.
Good afternoon, beautiful people. This is another episode of Album Mode. We review a new album every single week. We look at the lyrics, the production, the overall aesthetic of the album, and how the album fits into the context of that artist's career. For everyone watching on YouTube, make sure you like this video, subscribe to us, and of course, leave us a comment. Let us know how wrong we always are. My name is Adriel Smiley, a.k.a. AdrielSmiley.com, a.k.a. Adriel Smiley Official, a.k.a. The Godfather. We're here with His Royal Highness, a.k.a. The Bunny, a.k.a. No Longer a Munch, King Grant.
What's happening, people? We're back. This time, it's with the late, great Mac Miller and his posthumous album, Balloonerism. Basically, this album's been made since 2014. I have had a version, let's say, of Balloonerism for years, literally just sitting on a hard drive. And I was not thinking that I didn't think that this album was ever going to come out. I know that there was this, now we're in the internet room. At the beginning of the pod, we're already talking about the internet rumors, but when I got the version of Balloonerism that currently exists today, it's a different version. I remember there being this rumors like, oh, it wasn't supposed to come out until Mac was dead. This was recorded. The people knew when it was recorded, but it was like this whole rumor. It's not supposed to come out until he's dead. That's why they're not releasing it. But then Mac died in 2018, and there was nothing said about it. Right. So I was like, oh, I guess it's just not coming out. And it's going to be one of those things where it's just one of those like albums that just float on the internet, like, so many different albums in the past, especially in the era that he came up in the like Dat Piff
blog
era. So I was like, oh, so maybe it's never going to come out until recently. We get I think it was a social media, let's say a social media missive saying that Balloonerism is actually coming out in 2025, January. And we now live in January 2025. And we're reviewing Mac Miller's Balloonerism. Can you believe that?
Yeah, you said it all. I did not think this was ever coming out. And I'm happy we actually finally get to review a Mac Miller project because, him passing, you don't know when you're going to hear more music from him. And I think like comparing him to other artists who have had albums come out after they passed, Mac's estate is doing the best job by far.
I agree.
I think that goes without saying. We're not gonna name names, but doing the best job by far.
Juice WRLD.
And I think what's great about this project is that there's so much known about it from when he was alive, and it's not as much rumor based that we're kind of making stuff up after the fact. Like you said, you had a copy of it, before he passed. I remember this album being like something that everyone was like excited for. And I remember being disappointed because this is right before he dropped the album Good AM in 2015, which is one of those Mac Miller albums that I pretend never happened. But this was created around the time when he was, developing his critically acclaimed mixtape Faces, which you have behind you. And it was mostly created in this 2-week-long jam session in March of 2014. And he was in there a lot with Thundercat and Taylor Graves, all recorded by Josh Berg. And I want to mention that at first because when I first heard this project, the new Balloonerism, I kind of wasn't sure how much would be from that original time. And, a few songs into this, I was like, oh, this is Faces time. Like, you can tell in the production, in the lyrics, this is definitely that era of Mac Miller. Now, before we go any further, I want to kind of set the tone for us as Mac Miller fans. Now, we do this thing where we see how much songs we have saved from the artist. How much Mac Miller songs do you have saved on Spotify?
Total. Well, I would say, I hold on. Let me get it to you real quick.
And I don't want your explanation like you usually do of why you do or don't have a certain amount of song saves. Just give us the stats. Give us the numbers.
I have 61, but I would say that's even a misnomer because we were around during the blog era, so I just had his shit on.
Downloaded.
Yeah, I just have the MP3s. I have Kids, I have Blue Slide Park, I have Best Day Ever, etc. Right?
Shout out Best Day Ever.
That's when that shit actually just came out. You could just have it. So, and liking a ton of shit on Spotify, I'm like, am I gonna go back and like every song from every artist I've ever listened to? No. So there's gonna be instances like Mac Miller, Beyonce, artists Jay-Z, where I'm just not gonna have a ton of like songs.
The blog era is, I think, the biggest place for that because I think even the Beyonce J era before the blog era, we weren't downloading music as much. It was still the CD era. You're right. I was going through my like songs. Now, full disclosure, I have 149 like songs. But I have full albums that I like that I had no, like, you just mentioned Best Day Ever. I went to go check, not saved at all.
Yeah.
So you're right. He is from that, like, and what I call the actual golden age of hip hop, the blog era.
Yeah, it could be the second golden age.
The digital golden age.
Yeah.
We'll call it. So you said your favorite album is Kids. Is that correct?
So yeah, we were talking. Restarted. Ask me. Just ask me.
What's your favorite Mac Miller album?
So for me, it's Kids. I love Kids. I think that it's juvenile, but it's also very free, very carefree. I love the airiness of the production. To me, when I listen to Kids, I get my I feel like I'm in high school again. Right? I feel like I'm in high school again. I think that what year did it come out? Was it 2011?
2010.
2010. So I was literally in high school when that came out. And yeah, I just love its carefreeness. I love it. It just felt very relatable at that time. And then every time I listen to it, I'm like, yeah, it's just like high school again when we were back listening to early Drake, Wiz Khalifa, and Kendrick Lamar wasn't even really a thing at that point in time. So I think I love Kids. One thing about Kids that has carried forwards with me is that when I listen to any song by Westside Gunn, I'm like, this guy sounds like 16-year-old Mac Miller. And that has never left me. And that's pretty much why Westside Gunn has never resonated with me because his persona is like tough, grizzled, gangster, drug dealer. And, he's supposed to be super tough and stuff like that. And then he has like his ad-libs are a little boom, 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 boom. And he sounds like a 16-year-old kid. I'm like, this guy is a joke. Like, so for me, Kids is like, oh, this is what that voice is actually supposed to sound like and what it's supposed to be doing. So I love Kids. I love pretty much every song. I'm really trying to think of like maybe Nike's on My Feet is probably one of my best, or The Spins.
The Spins I like too.
The Spins.
Yep.
I like The Spins a lot. And Knock Knock, of course. So yeah. Kids is my favorite album or mixtape project. Whatever. What about you?
I'm just having a great time going through all these Mac Miller albums that I didn't have saved on here and just finding my favorite songs. A song slept on that it has a lot of plays on this project, but for a lot of fans, if you know, you know. If you don't, you don't. Earth with him and Future, very slept on Mac Miller song.
I gotta go back and listen.
Very, very good. Future hasn't done a song like that, I don't think, since.
Okay.
So very good song. It was tough for me to decide what my favorite album is from him. I have to say it is probably Watching Movies with the Sound Off because that was a project that I played so
surprised by that.
often. And that was like when Mac Miller almost grew up in a sense. It's like Kids Mac Miller and Watching Movies Mac Miller. No, they're not that far apart. Watching Movies came out in 2013, Kids is in 2010. Mm-hmm. But Mac Miller did so much growing in that time. He has much more tattoos. He's a lot older in terms of his actual content. And the thing that kind of stands out to me is, the actual covers of the two projects. Like the cover of Kids is literally him, in high school on the bench. The cover of Watching Movies, he's naked. So it's like, it's almost like he grew up so fast between those two projects. So that's the one for me. This album was recorded in 2014, like I mentioned before. And I think when it was recorded is important in terms of talking about Mac Miller's, musical journey. I like to personally call this is when we started getting Coke Mac Miller.
Okay.
Kids is weed Mac Miller. And, this is when he started getting into the hard drugs. And I want to mention the albums that came before that, because for all the Mac Miller fans, you can clearly see where that line is. In 2010, you have Kids, which was his breakout project, huge at the time, still an absolute classic. His debut album, which one of those projects that I probably never listened to from him, Blue Slide Park. Yeah, I was worried about him at that time. I said, okay, maybe the kid's getting a little too kid-like. But then when he put out Macadelic in 2012, which was, still peak mixtape blog era, I was like, okay, and why I'm mentioning Macadelic is because what comes from that in terms of watching movies, faces, this is where it starts as Macadelic. I know watching movies is the big project because it was the album, but Macadelic is where you start to see that more rap Mac Miller, where it gets a little more grungy. The features on this say it all: Juicy J, Cameron, Lil Wayne, Casey Veggies, Joey Badass, Kendrick Lamar, Sir Michael Rocks, for all you fans who know who that is. So that's the start of this. And then going into this era where Good AM would come after this, but where we got Faces and Balloonerism was created, was Mac getting into his instrumentation. And this is like a part of Mac Miller that you see really, really grow in the later projects when it comes to Divine Feminine, Swimming, and eventually Circles. But I think Balloonerism is such a great place for us to review him for the first time, because this is really where it started, even though this didn't come out till after he passed. And we end up hearing this kind of publicly years later. We see this is the start of him, what we heard Circles to be, what we heard Swimming to be. This is the start of him doing anything like that.
Yeah, it's definitely the instance where we see him becoming much more of a musician akin to like a Kanye or Tyler the Creator, or I don't know, like even a Prince. Now, I'm not talking about like on that level. But I'm talking about like they're now so heavily involved with like what their music sounds like from beginning to end, right? That that's where Balloonerism and like this era, basically this 2014, where he just become like he has to like he produces literally every song on this. I think except for one. I think it's like, Do You Have a Destination or something like that. One of the songs near the top. Where he doesn't produce, but every single other song he has a production credit on it as Larry Fisherman, his producer's pseudonym.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that this was one of those times where you start to really see he's totally involved. It's totally his vision from the beginning to end. And, we're talking about like the construction of this album, Balloonerism, is like the mythos of it is like people came in for jam sessions. Right, Thundercat shows up and start playing some of the chords on a guitar, or start playing some notes on a piano or something like that, and then it turns into a song. Same thing with like SZA. First of all, to get SZA in 2014 and to be like, yo, I want SZA on my album, it's kind of a big deal, because I think only S or Z had come out. Like Troll had not even come out yet. None of that. She was still doing mixtapes and shit. And he was already heavily involved in this and the production for I think it was Zed.
Yeah, Mac Miller is really how I got put onto SZA for real, because he was mentioning her, every so often and being one of her big early supporters. She's mentioned that now as like Mac was one of the first people in the industry to really support her. But that's the thing about this project that I'm happy you mentioned her, because when people saw this feature, they thought it was something that she did after the fact. And, a couple of people who have worked in putting this project together have confirmed that this was recorded at the time.
Yeah.
So I think
that's crazy.
That's pretty cool.
2014, man.
She was kind of in the mix even at that time. And you compared him to Tyler, Creator, and Kanye West. I'm going to say Mac is a level above them, because Mac as an instrumentalist is something that those guys have not shown in any way, shape, or form. I think about Live from Space, the live album that he did, and his guitar solo on The Question. Anyone who's I'm talking about, go and watch that. We've never seen Kanye or Tyler do anything remotely close to something like that. So I think that's why I kind of love this project, especially, is because we were sleeping on him at the time, and even after the fact, it's like we're giving guys like Tyler and Kanye this big credit when he's doing something that they actually haven't even done. So big shout out to Mac Miller for Larry Fisherman.
Yeah.
For being the producer that he was.
And also working with Thundercat. That's early Thundercat. I mean, Thundercat's been around for longer than we really know or think about Thundercat being around. It's like a 2011, 2010s blog era type dude, but is more of a he's a streaming era artist in like the general consciousness, but he actually existed in the blog era. But again, to have Thundercat and SZA 2014 version of them, and those artists still being relevant as like things that we actually talk about right now is kind of incredible.
And they're peaking. That's the other thing too, is they're peaking now, and he had them when he was kind of the hot one out of the three of them. Yeah, he was
the biggest one out of all of them.
Yeah, I want to start with DJ's chord organ, talking about lyrics. This is not actually one of my lyrics, but you mentioned SZA, so I had to throw this in there because this is the interesting thing about this project, where the first song is not really anything from Mac Miller. We don't really hear his voice basically at all. The second song, we also don't really hear his voice that much either. It's mostly a SZA song with some SZA and Thundercat singing together. And I think it's so interesting that this project that was, a bunch of jam sessions, is he's not kind of inserting his voice into it right away. And I turn the sequencing of the project is like, not till song 3 do we really, get to hear Mac Miller for real. But I think leaving kind of the jam session parts of this project in is what stood out to me. In the intro, he said what he said after the Grammys: B flat F, B flat F D. That being left in there, I think, is like makes me feel like, okay, this is actually what Mac Miller had it created originally. That's him and Josh Berg. And then SZA has this part at the end of her verse where she says, "Tell us the truth about it. Cocaine is ruthless. I know the truth about it. Cocaine is ruthless." I said it before. This is cocaine era Mac Miller. Throughout the album, he kind of alludes to his drug use a little bit because at this time, Macadelic, he had, I want to say, soft launched his drug use. Okay. And watching movies was the hard launch of his drug use. But, as you go through this project, there are some times where it's more covert and there's some times where it's more in your face. This song is one of the times when it's in your face. And it's like such an early version of SZA because the way she pronounced ruthless is such a SZA way to pronounce a word.
Yeah.
Like, she still is... she still does that to this day, but to see over a decade ago, she just can't pronounce nothing in a normal way. It's like SZA never changed.
Yeah, I had it written down here. I'm like, wow, the more articulate SZA is somehow in this. Like, you can actually understand the words on first blush, which is amazing. Like, that's how you know it's early SZA.
But still not normal.
But still not fully
ruthless.
With that, it's like the pronunciation is weird. But when we listen to SZA now, the articulate, like what the words just sound like, or like
all over the place.
Exactly. So at least we're getting full throat SZA, right? Where it's just like, I actually understand the words first time.
Yeah.
But I like that song a lot too. I think that the droning notes, because they just like D, and it's like all the way through the entire song. So I think that's really good. I think in terms of lyrics, I think that one of the things that really seemed eerie to me was the lyrics. Like on a song like "Do You Have a Destination?" This is in verse 1 where he's like, "I gave my life to this shit, already killed myself. We ain't the same, homie. The world afraid to change, but it changed on me. Always been the realest, keep the same homies. So all that bullshit fades slowly." That verse is eerie to me because he's already talking about his death. This is in 2014, so this is 4 years before he actually died. And it's kind of like a Tupac-ness where he's like always talking about his death. So now when you hear a posthumous version of him talking about his death, it's just like, did he know? You gotta, did he know? But then you're also like, obviously nobody fully knows when they're gonna die. But it's just really eerie because it gives this feeling of like he's speaking from beyond the grave. to you, right? Just like how Tupac did a lot with his music. And I'm comparing him to a lot of legendary artists right now. Maybe he's on that level.
He is. He is for sure.
And yeah, I think that that's just one pair or one set of lyrics. There's a couple other ones that are like that too. Where it's just like eerie. It's so eerie. It's so eerie to hear somebody talk about death, dying, or being dead while being dead, but the music is new. So you're like, where is this coming from? Where is he speaking to me from, you know?
This, I said it before, has a lot of Faces influence on it. Like, we talked about it before we recorded the song Funeral at the end of Faces, which, if anyone knows that song, very eerie Mac Miller song. And it's like the more drugs he started doing, the more he started talking about his death. And so this is one of those projects where drugs, death, tripping is like the theme, running all over this album. And I actually have a piece of lyrics from the same song, which is pretty interesting. But I think about this one story that I think it was French Montana told the story. Hopefully I'm thinking of the right person. But it was when Mac Miller was on his lean type of vibe, when he was big lean Mac Miller. Okay. And it was talking about him dozing off in the studio. And he was so leaned up that he literally couldn't sit up straight. And he had to miss a couple shows because it was time to go on stage. And he's just backstage, passed out from lean.
Right.
And, I think about this side of drug use that we never actually saw from Mac Miller as much. Because this was still approaching the era when he would get on YouTube and the internet, and like we'd see him produce and make beats and play guitar and freestyle. But it's kind of rare for an artist to not show us it as much, to see it in front of a screen, but we heard him rap about it so often.
Right.
And so it almost felt like we could just do a temperature check of, okay, how much drugs is he doing? Where is he in terms of his drug use at a certain time by a certain project? On the second verse of Do You Have a Destination? He says, okay, I went to sleep famous and I woke up invisible. Rich as fuck and miserable. At least I did Kimmel and Arsenio. My mom got it on video. That's the shit I live for. All this other shit is trivial. Will you bear witness to a miracle? I don't know. I'm not a kid no more. Coming for those residuals. Be asleep in a couple minutes. Why I mentioned that story about sleep is that he mentions sleep so often on this project, and there's also that phrase, sleep is a cousin of death, but I think mentioning sleep so often maybe wouldn't be as noticeable if he wasn't mentioning death so often.
Yeah.
So it's this album where he's mentioning death very often and sleep very often.
Yeah.
And I think, that going with the drug use, there is something there in terms of like the circle that he's going through. And he said this on a couple songs before, but it's like from people who have had, issues with drug use or heavy into the drug use like he was, it's like when you are that high and you're doing that much drugs, every time you go to sleep, it's like a crapshoot. You're really wondering, am I going to wake up again? Mm-hmm. And so that's what I think about in terms of his lyrics over and over again. And I think about it, I guess, more because he's passed away, but that's clearly on his mind as well, that he's mentioning sleep and death. And it feels like almost every song.
Yeah, it is. It's a little bit sad. It genuinely is a little bit sad. And there's definitely instances where the death and the drug abuse situation kind of conflicts with how good the song is. Not in like a way where I'm like, it's unlistenable, but it definitely brings a different tenor to the song. So a song like Stoned, which is probably one of my favorite songs on this album, Balloonerism. And this is on the hook, right? He's like, it's very, very dreamy. Very, very dreamy vocals. I love the echo. I love the electric guitar during that part. Makes it feel psychedelic. Psychedelic, like rock, like a Jimi Hendrix type of vibe. But this is in the chorus. He's like, baby, let's get stoned. Put on a record. Can I play you one more song? We can get stoned. I swear to God, heaven feels just like home. Let's go home. Right? So I just found that an interesting turn of phrase. You definitely meant this on purpose, where it's like people, like there's very, very frequently a comparison between drugs and like heaven. You feel like you're in heaven and stuff like that. But then to say that to say in the songs like I swear to God, heaven feels just like home, and then let's go home. So it's like that's like the heaven part of drugs, like being high feels just like home to him, and he's like let's go home. So it's an interesting like flip on that that idea of heaven and drugs and home and stuff like that. So I thought that was really cool. But then again, it's like kind of eerie because it's like he's dead. He's also dead, and he's saying like heaven feels just like home, let's go home. He's dead, right? So that's just like a really, really like it that just those are like two lines that I'm really swear to God, heaven feels just like home, let's go home. That just those two lines carry way more weight to them when you're deceased and because of the drug abuse that he was dealing with. So yeah, I love that song. I think that, you know, there's lots of great like things happening on it, like the knock effect, where he says like, I forgot what he said something like, I heard a knock on the door, and then there's actually like a pounding sound.
Yeah.
So there's great things happening production wise and lyrical wise on this album, but yeah, the weight of the lyrics is just more significant when he's dead and he's talking about his death that much.
Yeah, Stoned is one of those songs on here that I was like, this sounds like it's from Faces, like 1,000,000%. That drum pattern as well. And this is like the era where these felt like live drums rather than programmed drums. And as well, I think it's so interesting the weight that his lyrics have now, because this is something I've said about Juice WRLD for a long time, and it's part of why I probably was never a Juice WRLD fan for real, is like he sounds like he's going through something in his lyrics. Like,
yeah,
you know, it's almost evident to me that I'm like, we're shaking ass to this when someone has to come talk to this guy. And Mac Miller was the same in that way, where some of the lyrics you hear, you're like, this is a little bit
cutting a little too close to the bone, bro.
Yeah, and I think why I bring that up is because this is from the Faces era, and Faces at least was an album that I remember, and Mac Miller fans in the comments, you guys let me know where that was like something that people were talking about when the album came out. I think Macadelic, watching movies, it was talked about a little bit on certain records, but it was more like, hey, we like the music, we like the energy, we kind of like that he's, you know, doing a little more drugs. The music is getting better.
Yeah.
Faces was the first project I remember almost in kind of hip hop in my lifetime where everyone's like, I like this, but I'm a little bit worried for him.
Yeah.
And I think that it's so interesting because I feel like hip hop as a genre doesn't really have that kind of compassion for a rapper's lyrics. No, no matter where they're headed. I said this about Future for a long time, where I said Future is older than all of us, and he apparently never sees his kids. Is still in pain from whoever he fucked 3 years ago, and no one thinks this is a little weird. And I think like
it's true. I'm laughing, but it's true.
It's such a like entertainment based genre where it's like whatever is fun for us, you know. And I think it's very interesting that it's kind of like choosy which artists people have that attachment to, of like, okay, maybe they're going through something. I think about someone like Kid Cudi,
right?
Who it took 3 or 4 albums for people in a real way to be like, maybe he's not in a good space right now. And to see Mac have so much of this kind of content in his lyrics is so interesting. And, you know, you mentioned Jimi Hendrix. Like, you can tell the psychedelic influence on a lot of his music, you know, lyrically and sonically. And Excelsior.
Love that song.
That's the other one I have for lyrics. And I think that this was the song that kind of made me the saddest.
Me too.
Because I realized, you know, Mac clearly had matured in a whole different way in music. You can hear that on Swimming, which is the album that came out right before he passed. You can hear that on Circles, you know. But I think that I would have loved to gotten a mid-30s Mac Miller. Like, I would have loved to see what his content would have been like for him to make it to his mid-30s. Because I think that he could have had some really introspective lyrics that would have really been powerful. And this song is the one that made me feel like that. I was like, you know, how old is he in 2014? Like, still pretty young. And imagine if he had made it to, you know, 11, 12 years later, it's like we could have gotten some real powerful lyrics. Because, you know, you compare him to Tyler, the Creator. Tyler, the Creator, this is now the album in his mid-30s where he's sounding, the most mature he's ever sounded, talking things never talked about before.
Very reflective.
This is Mac Miller in 2014.
Yeah, he was 22.
Mac Miller in 2014 and Tyler Creator in 2014 is two complete different people.
22-year-old Tyler Creator was making Goblin, bro.
You know what I mean? So it's like, to see, as much as like there's some fun records from kids, there's a bunch of darker drug records from Macadelic and watching movies.
Mm-hmm.
A song like this, you're like, there's something else deeper there lyrically that he has that he almost kind of never got to bring out in the full way, I think.
Yep.
On verse 1, he says, on 4th Street, the orphan children play on the jungle gym. Little Timmy broke his arm again on the monkey bars. Johnny's dad got a nicer car than all the other kids. He becomes the alpha and picks on everybody else. Max protects Claire from all the bullies. Claire always wishes she was as pretty as Julie. The boys always chase Julie around the sandbox. Claire just waits till she gets picked up by her grandpa. All of this before the brainwash starts. It's like, what he just laid out right there, like that is as basic as it gets in terms of spelling it out pretty clearly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the part to me that I really connected to was how there's no almost backstory for any of these characters that he's mentioning. Like, how many verses do you get where someone mentions, what is this, 5 names? Timmy, Johnny, Max, Claire, Julie. And we understand this whole thing.
Right.
And there's no context given. There's no, like, has to explain who it is. And it's like, that is almost genius within itself, where all he says is, Johnny's dad got a nicer car than all the other kids. He becomes the alpha and picks on everybody else. And it's like, simple as that. Your dad has a nice car. Your dad's the rich dad. Okay, so you go to school and you bully the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Claire wishes she was pretty as Julie. All the boys chase Julie in the sandbox. Everyone can do the math on all these things.
Right.
And it's like, it's so simple that, again, this probably wouldn't get the think piece that a Kendrick Lamar verse would get in 2025. But in reality, what he's explaining is kind of basic concepts in terms of social interactions that still exist to this day, and especially on the internet. So for him to have this in 2014, and I don't know what he was high off when he made this, but to kind of spell it out so clearly, it's like we don't see verses like this very often.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to Mac Miller, I think he's really in touch with his childhood, really in touch with being a child, being a kid. I think that song is also a perfect example of it, because also you're hearing like the children play in the background. And then you have Tomorrow We'll Never Know. This is the last song. Basically, I want to say 8:30, where you start hearing, all of the instruments start to just like literally fall apart. Like you're just hearing like, like out of tune guitar. You're hearing like these crazy synths that are just like all over the place, and like everything is just like drooping away. And then you get the kids in the background, like, like playing and like running around. You hear them like screaming and stuff. And then the phone just endlessly ringing in the background. And this is kind of like where the production and the lyrics thing of what I'm talking about really connect, is where, because of that, like this connects with a lot of things. So it's basically, you hear those children playing in the background and then that phone ringing. And it's almost like, this is like the last album that he's ever going to put out, I think. And his first mixtape being Kids, it kind of gave me like a reincarnation vibe.
Yes.
When I listened to this, because I was like, at the end of this is with the kids playing outside, right, and the phone call, and I was like, it's almost first of all, when somebody's dead, sometimes people try to call that person. You'll even know the person is dead. You're like, I just talked to that person, right? Yesterday or something.
Shoot them a text.
And you still try to call them and be like, hold on a second, let me call them. And it's like, when somebody's dead, the phone is just like endlessly ringing. But then you also have like the kids playing in the background, like, when you're a kid, like you're just born like a year or two ago, right? So I think that connection, but then also the connection to his first album being called Kids, right? And him being he was a teenager at that time. It kind of gave me this like loop to his entire discography that most people do not get, right? You do not really get a last album be like, I'm gonna connect it to the very beginning so people can actually get some circular concept going on with my music. But to me, I'm like, he's dead in his last album. He's dead. But then you hear the kids playing in the background. I'm like, you know, this first album is kids, right? And he's still trying. It's like almost he's trying to like call the kid to tell him that he's dead, right? So there's a lot of elements like that. Those like childlike elements actually feed into the aesthetic, but also like the overall arc of what he did as an artist. I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, I think the part about this project that's kind of interesting is it almost makes more sense now that he has passed away. And you get to tie in all these parts of his career, like you said, kids, faces, watching movies, that maybe if this had come out in 2014, it doesn't have the same effect.
Yeah.
And I think as well, when you talk about you know, the actual production of this project, you know, Shangri-La, that's a song that I like on here.
Really? You like that song?
Yeah, I like that song. I think this is like one of the projects to me that I'm like, even though he's done a bunch of different sounds, this project has so much sounds on here that I'm like, this is what I think of as a Mac Miller sound.
Okay.
And, you know, I've always thought of like a mix of, you know, the swimming keys Mac Miller mixed with like the Faces rap Mac Miller. And that's what Shangri-La feels like to me, is like you kind of brought those two worlds together. He's rapping over this, but the actual production on here is not giving hip hop really at all. Like it's very, very like,
it's giving Solange.
I would say it's giving more jazz with kind of like that like drumming behind the beat, like Questlove did on Voodoo. And I think that this part of his production style really, really, you see influence what he did going forward, because, you know, he never actually stops rapping. He eventually becomes like a more singer rapper in style, but to think that he changed his production style to be way more live instruments and then kept rapping over them, like who else have we really seen do that? And Shangri-La is the song for me that kind of embodies that, because this is like, you know, a jam session. That's what this beat clearly is. And for a rapper to rap over a jam session like this is like, I don't know. You tell me, is there an analog for this, or someone else who really has done this or does this on a consistent basis? I know there's been, you know, certain sessions or things like this happen, but, you know, his production style is playing live instruments still and playing with other live players.
The only person I can think of is maybe No Name, or like maybe Mick Jenkins, because that's what this album, Balloonerism, actually reminds me of. Like that group of people, Smino, No Name, especially Smino. Yeah, Smino, No Name, Mick Jenkins. This album like reminds me of that enclave of people. But the thing is, with that enclave of people, they all released their music in like 2016. This is made in 2014. So technically, it's like, even though it's come out now in 2025, it was like ahead of its time to a degree.
But I think, you know, it's not even kind of. I think you're right on the nose with that one, because like I said, a lot of these beats sound like they're from Faces. You know, so I think Faces was definitely more rap leaning than a lot of this. Like this to me feels like the R&B B-side of what Faces end up being. You know, Faces was the rap side of the project, and this is kind of the like more jazz, R&B, pop side of the project.
I'll give you a great example. $5 pony rides, right? That the entire instrumentation of it, the fact that like the keyboard, it's like a keyboard, not a piano, and it sounds more almost like a little bit church, like church inspired.
Organ, yeah.
Yeah, it's got the tambourine. Is it an organ? I feel like it's a keyboard. It sounds like a keyboard.
No, sorry, it is a keyboard, yeah. But he's an organ on a couple of songs.
Yeah, he used an organ on a couple of songs. And yeah, I think that even like the pace to it, like it's a little bit like hurried in the pace. I'm like, this could have been on like Smino's like Noir or Black Swan or something like that. Especially when it came to the end where he was like, can I give you what you need? You know, can I give you what you want? And then what you need, girl, yeah. Said, can I give you what you want? Whoa, whoa, whoa. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, you know what I mean? Like that.
Whoa, whoa, who's on this album?
Yeah. Like, but like that outro, that like cadence, like the cadence, like the flow, even though that it's less rappy. Smino's work at that time, again, but that was in 2016.
Yeah, it was less rappy.
It was less rappy, right? It was more neo soul, more a little bit more spoken word, just like No Name. That's why I said that Enclave. And I felt like it fit perfectly. Like if this came out today, we'd be like, "Where's the Smino feature?"
Yeah, and I think all the people you named, Smino, McJenkins, even Saba to a degree. I think this is like almost like a sign of confidence from those artists that they don't need that traditional hip hop box to still rap and give their poetry. And I think that's what you see from Mac on this is like the lyrical confidence is how I call it. Of like, yeah, this is not traditional at all. This is not even really a hip hop beat, but I got this. Like, we're still gonna do this. Do you have a destination? Is like one of the production parts that I feel like I can't get out of my head. And it's funny because you mentioned it last week on the Bad Bunny project, and I know what you're thinking. How does Bad Bunny and Balloonerism relate in any way, shape, or form? But you talked about Bad Bunny cutting these songs short and cutting the beat out. There's a part in DF Destination where he cuts the beat out and it's just some chords and keys and then the drums come back in and you know he's still rapping on that and it's not a traditional beat drop how hip hop would do where the beat cuts out, it's like a huge drop, a huge moment, right, and then we hop back in. The verse goes on as normal. And I think like that is something that we don't really see in the same way where the drums go out, but the chords and keys remain, and he keeps rapping. Like that small bit right there is like, you could tell that even though hip hop was his home in a sense, that he was thinking of music kind of in a larger world than just hip hop. And that's I think the production lesson to me from this project is we've mentioned a bunch of elements, a bunch of different artists that he reminds us of, but this is to me where a part of hip hop is now. You mentioned artists again who are still doing good right now, McJenkins, No Name, Smino, but it's like those artists I think even now have kind of moved more to the center of hip hop in terms of their production style from where they were in 2016. When I feel like this is a part where, again, a lot of these songs, if it wasn't Mac Miller, you just heard these instrumentals, are you guessing someone's rapping over this? I'm guessing probably not.
Do you have a destination? Smino, yes. Do you have a destination? $5 pony rides, and I think friendly hallucinations.
I think you could say that Smino could rap on them, but if you don't have any context of who this song is from or who it belongs to, and they just play the instrumental, are you guessing that this is a rap song?
Oh, that's a good question.
That's what I mean with this is like, you know, this being a hip hop album, you know, inherently, and him rapping on those, and you know, comparing a hip hop artist is like, that's him bringing that to our minds in terms of it being a hip hop artist, because these instrumentals on their own are not inherently hip hop.
Right, that's true. One thing I wanted to bring up, even it's a lyric and production thing overall, is Mrs. Deborah Downer.
Yeah.
At the very end where it's, I guess like maybe some like very, it feels like church. So a lot of the music, like the keyboards or the synths sound like the keys or chords that would be played during like Black church.
Yeah, those keys at the end of Deborah Downer. Yeah, love them.
That sounds like that's like a Black church vibe to me. The drums are super slow all over this album, but it's like halftime, quarter time. But really, it's like when he's like, "What you gonna do when the money's coming slow? What you gonna do when the money comes?" I don't know why that part just really gets me. I love that section so much. I think that it accentuates like just the slowness of all of the music. And then it also got me thinking, I'm like, there's this time I mentioned in my notes, melting, right? A melting effect. And that's one of the songs that have a melting effect, but also Rick's piano.
I don't know how I knew you were going to mention that song, but continue.
Rick's piano has that melting effect, especially at the end as well. And I was like, this was just like in my head. I'm like, you know who I also say has like a melting effect to their music?
I know where you're heading.
Uchis.
I knew.
And I'm like, I wonder what that would even have sounded like.
That would have been heat. That would have been heat.
Yeah, because Uchis' music, we always say melting. There's a melting effect, a slowdown effect. Her music is much more sexy than Mac Miller's.
Yes.
But there would have been an interesting crossover if they could have met in that melting world together and what that music would have sounded like. It was just like a thought that came to my head when I'm hearing his voice getting all warbly and the drums are getting sporadic, and you're just hearing just like just sporadic everything, sporadic drums, sporadic keys, sporadic everything. But there's this melting effect, and I'm like, man, Kali Uchis in this space would be very, very interesting.
Yeah, this album, when I think about it as a whole in terms of like the cohesiveness and what this project, I guess, would have meant for his career.
Yeah.
I think back to a review we did a couple weeks ago. And this person I'm thinking about wasn't actually even around when this album was created. That's Lil Baby. And I think to myself, there's probably zero chance of Mac Miller ever doing the numbers Lil Baby does or is doing. But I think personally, Lil Baby has no chance of making an album as good as this. And
wow, strong.
Not strong at all. But I think that this was kind of an era where most of the top guys, were blending musicianship and hip hop into their music, where you can get a cohesive album that has a story and themes and all these different elements. And the part that you mentioned on, Rick's piano, that the end, like that outro was also my favorite part of the song. And like for the outro of him just kind of like riffing and freestyle like at the end being our favorite part of the song, that is something that the other artists are just not doing, period. It's very cookie cutter of like, okay, 4-bar intro, the beat comes in, verse, chorus, verse, 2 choruses, song is done.
Yeah.
And I think even the song structure that he has in this, this really, in terms of how it meant for his career, his last 3 projects, you really, really see where it came through. So to me, this is was a big win for his career. And I kind of love that we get to say that, even though this never came out when he was alive.
Yeah.
It was a 2-week jam session that turned into this.
Hey, that happens.
But it's like when you look at the Divine Feminine, Swimming, and then Circles, it's like you see the tenets of what those became on this project.
Yeah. The jam session thing, underrated, because remember, I think what was it, Kanye with My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy?
Yeah.
Did that in like 3 weeks. Drake and 21 Savage, or was it Drake and Future?
Drake and Future.
Where they made What a Time to Be Alive in like a weekend. Yeah. So if you can compound, if you can really get the right people in the room and just like smash it together well enough, then something good can really come out of it. I think that one last thing that I want to mention on top of what you were just talking about is Mannequins is like, again, the dreamscape. He's going for this very dreamy, very very childlike dreamscape. Like that sounds like the intro, that harp sounds like the intro to like a dream sequence in a cartoon.
Exactly. That's literally spot on.
Right? So I think that his ability to mesh the dreamness and the childlike naivete of just like life is amazing. And I think that it goes well with this album and overall his career, because when you're dead, typically people, they view you, it's very mournful, right? Death is associated with blackness, darkness, it's sad, it's somber. But he figured out that he's been dead. But this album allows for there to be a levity to his death. There is happiness that's happening here. Songs like Stoned are fun, right? There's Mannequins and Excelsior, Tomorrow We'll Never Know, talking about children, happiness, people laughing and stuff like that. So it adds an element of like liveliness to his passing that most artists do not get. When they're dead, it's like, fuck, I can't, like, it's over. I can't believe this happened. But at least with Balloonerism, this is his second posthumous album, because I think, what was it, Faces? It came out in 2020. Circles, sorry. And it still allows like, oh, there was still something here, or there was still some humor, or there was still some liveliness, or there was still something, there was still something that was happening, that was still happy, still lively. And I think that that's good overall, because I think this leaves everything on a good note, like you mentioned.
Yeah, it's almost like he wasn't as scared of his death as it would seem from him mentioning it so much.
Yeah.
Like he mentioned it so often, but a lot of these bars are not him being scared of it. and running away from it. It's just like, this is what it is.
Yeah,
Like,
eventually it's going to happen.
you know, and I think maybe the drug use is part of that because it felt so imminent so often. You know, we're not doing lyrics anymore, but at the end of Deborah Downer, it says, "Can I get 4 Norcos, 2 Oxys, 2 Roxys, 3 methadone, couple Percocets, some heroin, 2 Xanax bars, and 6 ounces of that lean?" And it's like, obviously that's, you know, a little tongue in cheek, but is part of it? Because I think that is what is part of this whole thing. Is thinking about Mac Miller's legacy. And we usually don't do a legacy question at the end of these because, you know, the artists are still alive, still much more to do. But I think of what this album means for his legacy is, I don't know if this will be his last posthumous album. He has a ton of music. You know, people have been talking about that Mac Miller Mad Lib. Maybe that's not going to happen anymore because of the LA fires. We don't know, but if this is his last project that we hear, this is definitely a good kind of
it's a great capper.
Cap to everything. I think Tomorrow We'll Never Know, as of the end of this as well, is like such a poetic ending to everything.
Edit there, so make sure that what I said is like the capstone. Okay, I'm shooting you bail right now. Just take the bail.
But I think, to me, he may never get his just due, and he feels like he's a group of those artists who, once they pass, they get more love in almost an artificial way because they're past.
I agree.
But I felt this way when he was alive, and I feel this way even more now hearing an album like this. Is, you know, Mac Miller is one of the most talented, you know, rappers we've ever had, musicians. You can even make that case. And I think too, like, he's probably the only rapper I can say who really, really got slept on because of his whiteness. Because when I think of him being compared to people, like we said, like Kanye and Tyler, is like, we've never seen those guys give an insane guitar solo.
Right.
You know, and then give you 62 bars right afterwards. And the guitar solo being in a song with Lil Wayne, like, all of that we've never seen. And it's almost like if Mac Miller was given the respect while he was alive, even how we're talking about Tyler's production now would be so different. Because I don't think Tyler's production even stands with Mac Miller's production from 2014.
Ooh.
Like, that's just truly how I feel.
Ooh.
I think, like, it's exciting that Tyler's making production that's not Goblin. So it does, you know, it is cool. I love Flower Boy. I love the new project. But I think in reality, what Mac Miller had been doing since 2014, 2013, what he has done is, like, we haven't seen another artist really do anything like that in terms of different sounds, rapping ability, the versatility, you know, having all these great features. And he doesn't do songs with nobody else.
Yeah.
Like, he only has You Come to Him. Like, that's the other part too. So it's like, all the things he's doing by the actual criteria, we would put him in a different conversation. And the main reason I'm talking about this is because of his actual discography. You know, we talked about this maybe 8 months ago now, when we talked about Kendrick Lamar and how he has all these great albums. And, you know, in hip hop, the album has kind of been like the shining star. You know, J. Cole talked about it on his podcast where he said, that's why I spent so much time getting ready for my first album, because I wanted the classic. Once you have the classic, you can do whatever you want.
Yep.
And we've seen it with a bunch of artists. Once you have that classic, the world is yours.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, in a way, Mac Miller has a few classics, but never got the credit for it. And it's like, you know, he's passed, so maybe he'll never get the credit for it, but it's almost like he ended up making more classics because he never got the credit for the classics.
Yeah, I think that Mac Miller was, I would say, slightly ahead of his time. Especially when you listen to this album, because this was made in 2014. This shit could have dropped today.
Yeah.
And it could, well, it did. You know exactly what I mean when I said that it could drop today. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It could drop today, and it doesn't sound dated. It sounds a little bit old just because of, you know, of Mac Miller at that time period. You know what his music sounded like. But today, how hip hop sounds, or alternative hip hop, this would be classified. He would be standing next to like your Brockhamptons, Tyler the Creators in
You know what's crazy?
Right, that's where he would be in. That's the box he would be in.
I wouldn't even think he would be there. I think he would be like almost in a whole different spot, like with like the Claros and people like that. Like, you know what I'm saying? Because it's like,
but Claro is Tyler the Creator adjacent. She likes Tyler the Creator.
No,
she does.
Liking Tyler the Creator doesn't make you Tyler the Creator adjacent.
It kind of does.
Who doesn't like Tyler the Creator? Like, come on, he's a big artist. A lot of people like
DJ
him.
Khaled doesn't like Tyler the Creator. DJ Khaled is
personal research.
Yeah, that's a personal. No, but seriously, I think that Claro and Tyler the Creator and like what's the guy that's Rex Orange County.
Mm-hmm.
That's the area that he is
yeah, he would be over there, like even like Nick Hakim, people like I think he would be in like almost in an alternative R&B pop space.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's crazy because, you know,
but in 2014, that wasn't really like a thing.
And you're perfect. That's what I'm saying. That wasn't even a space to be in 2014 in the same way. And I think we haven't seen, like, Tyler's probably the rapper other than the Brockhampton as a group to like really like go into that space from hip hop. Mm-hmm. But it's like Mac Miller was there before all y'all, like in reality. And it's like what Mac Miller had done as a rapper is almost a whole different level, because in reality, Tyler didn't like get his credit as a rapper until Call Me If You Get Lost. You know, Flower Boy and Igor were like him stepping away from rap a little bit. And it's like, okay, now that you're not rapping as much, we like you. You know what I mean? When it's like Mac Miller having like Macadelic Faces Watching Movies, those are 3 albums that like people love that are like rap albums. And so it's like we haven't seen someone mesh those two together, and maybe Tyler that's part of what's going to be him going forward, and he'll eventually do that in the way that Mac did. But I think, you know, you said he's a little bit ahead of his time. I think he's way ahead of his time, and I think in reality, like I'm kind of waiting to see if anyone will even reach what he did before he passed. Because even before he passed, and this is before we get into our scores, like, you know, I always say like for a rapper, at least in hip hop, to be considered like, you know, you're solidified, you're a legend to some, you have a career, most times you need 3 good projects. Now, I think that's a low bar, but that's just the reality of it. 3 good projects, and people will have you solidified. That's your quote-unquote run. Now, we talked about a couple weeks ago, Lil Baby might not even have that, but to some, he does. Your body, your choice. But I mentioned he has 3 rap projects, and let's include 4, because I think Kids is in that. 4 rap projects that, to me, are top quality with Kids, Macadelic, Watching Movies, and Faces. All of those projects, I would personally give at least 8 out of 10.
Yeah, you're high on Macadelic.
Macadelic is, I have it on vinyl. That's a very good album.
You have a lot of Mac Miller's music on vinyl, though.
And then talk about the projects that are not traditional hip hop in the same way, in terms of The Divine Feminine, Swimming, Circles, and Balloonerism. I think, personally, I'm the lowest on Circles out of all of those. But I know that everyone loves Circles and Swimming. And so it's like, that's 8 albums I just named that it's like are quality projects. How many artists, any genre, have 8 quality projects? I don't know. In the comments, let me know who they are. But it's like, if that to me is something that it's like, the artists that we love that we're bigging up now have 4 quality projects. Yeah.
So I think this really goes back to the concept that I said. I'm like, the lane that he wasn't really constructing it, because I don't consider him like the constructor, originator of this, but the lane that he was operating in didn't exist, right? So the type of
who would you call the constructor of it?
I don't know. I would have to think more deeply about that. To be honest, because like, when you think about alternative hip hop in 2014, that wasn't really a thing.
Okay.
Right? Like, it wasn't really. I'm trying to really think about it. Like, it wasn't.
I think the phrase was around, but I don't think it sounded like what we think of as this.
Yeah, Rex Orange, like it's like a spectrum of what I'm talking about. It's like, what's the playlist on Spotify? It's like Ipsum or like Lorem.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Loripsum?
I think it's Lorem, right? It's the one with like the flowers on it. Right?
That place is still around? Okay, yeah.
Where it's like, you know, Tyler the Creator, Mac Miller would be in it, Clara would be in it, like the Marias would be in it. You know, I'm trying to think of who else. Rex Life. Or I always say I try to say Rex Orange County, but I'm always say like Rex Life Raj. if you know who that is.
No.
But yeah, it's like this very like left of center, but this very playful and like very idyllic type of production. And he was in that, but hip hop at 2014, I'm trying to think, was like What a Time to Be Alive. No. Yeah, What a Time to Be Alive was around that time.
What Time to Be Alive was 2017, I believe.
2017. So before that's Views. What's before?
No, that's right before. If you read this, it's too late. 20.
Okay, if you're reading this, it's too late.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that was one of the, I think it was like Forest Hill Drive from J. Cole.
Yeah, 2014 Forest Hill Drive, yeah.
Right? So didn't sound like this in hip hop at all. Like it was not sounding like this.
Yeah, I
nothing.
yes, I'm looking at 2014 hip hop playlist.
Yeah.
Yes, nothing like
Yeah,
this.
nothing
I'm
was
not even
really-
gonna say what's on this,
It's like
but nothing
Meek
like
Mill, your Nicki Minaj. Nicki Minaj was in her pop era at that time. Meek Mill was just becoming really a thing.
this. Rich Homie Quan,
Rich Homie Quan.
Migos,
We're talking about Versace.
still Wiz Khalifa,
Yeah,
ASAP Ferg.
exactly. So you see what I'm saying? So he was existing in this space that just didn't exist at that time. And I think that he was getting underrated because like there was no box. There was no box and there was no other compatriots to put him beside. So he kind of just like existed by like, yeah, listen to Mac Miller. It's like, that's kind of weird, like weird sounding hip hop. Like what's going on over
And
there?
you brought up a good point too. Is like I think both sides of his musicality both didn't have a home.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think even though I love Macadelic, I love watching movies, those are still not like, there's a group of songs here in this playlist. Classic Man by Jadena,
Wow.
Check Young Thug, White Iverson, Post Malone, Antidote, Travis Scott. It's like even his rap stuff doesn't fit in with that.
Yeah.
And his alternative stuff didn't have a home either. And it's like both are very good music, but it's like you have almost a split of two genres you make and neither of them have a home.
Mm-hmm.
That's another rare thing that we don't usually see. So
Yeah, but they exist now. That's the thing. Like the homes for it now is like, okay, he's with, the Brockhampton Style, the creators. And then this is like, it's kind of more with the Solange and like the No Names and like the Sminos. You know what I mean?
And even I think Faces would be with like the Westside Gunn,
Yeah.
Rock Marciano type of vibe.
But these are all new developments in hip hop being cool. Like these things were not cool in 2013, 2014. We weren't even on the radar.
And I think the part of it is like it's kind of crazy to say, but I think the part of hip hop and music that the white internet loved hadn't like grown to popularity at this time.
That's true.
No,
That's
it's true. It's like white people hadn't, taken their stake on the internet in terms of music and deciding what was popular. Like they were late to the party in a sense because it's like, I think because he's a white rapper, so much of the center of black hip hop ignored him. When it's like if the white internet had like, got their bearings in 2014. Like Mac Miller is probably one of the best-selling artists out right now.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
Very true.
Because it's like
because it's inoffensive too. It's not like crazy abrasive or anything like that.
And if you think about what happened after him in terms of like white rappers succeeding, all less talented than him, but Macklemore, Logic, white facing, G-Eazy.
Oh, G-Eazy.
And it's like Post Malone. It's like all.
Debatable.
What do you mean? Debatable like he's white?
No.
What do you mean debatable?
Not debatable that he's white. Debatable that he's less talented.
Then Mac Miller for sure.
Oh my god, that was so funny. Better singer.
For sure.
Okay.
For sure. But that's about it.
Okay.
But I think Mac Miller is like, yes, he's a legend to a lot of people. A lot of people know who he is, but to me, he will always be to me the ultimate what if in music history. Just because, again,
5 years too early.
5 years too early, but I just mentioned 8. I said 8 quality projects. That's like, there's our artists who are legacy acts that don't have 8 quality projects. Does Usher have 8 quality projects? Like, that's just the truth.
Lionel Richie?
We're gonna leave a lot of this, but it's like I said 8 quality projects, and I didn't mention his first 2 albums. I didn't mention Best Day Ever.
Yeah, Best Day Ever is really good.
So it's like he's to have that many quality projects is like Beyonce type shit.
Yeah.
And it's like people don't think of Mac Miller and Beyonce in terms of being in the same category musically, in terms of how good they are. But if like if you really look at what's going on, they're really closer than you think. So to me, he's the biggest what if in music history to me.
Okay.
I can't, again, in the comments, let me know before we finish. Is there anyone in music history who has 8 quality projects who's kind of this slept on? I really can't think of someone who has this much quality projects. Let's talk about the cover quickly before we get to the scores.
Okay. I love it. I love it, and I'm surprised. I think this is what if you had the original, or let's say the internet floated files, I believe this was the same cover.
Okay, that's what I thought too, but I don't have those files. But I'm just like, it's my 2013 memory.
Yeah, it's like it was a long time ago. I'm like, I think it's the same cover, or if not, very similar.
Similar image. I like that there's a person at the bottom kind of holding the balloon.
Yeah, me too.
And kind of floating. Again, I'm back to it. It reminds me of Faces cover because it's kind of like so, abstract in a sense. But this might be one of my favorite covers from him. Like, I don't know, where I would rank this guy. I guess to sit with this for a bit, but one of my favorite covers from him for sure.
Yeah, I think that it's very fun. I think that I forgot what the type of art that this is, where it's like your eyes are like all the parts of your body are in different locations instead of the correct locations. But I think that's a great example of it. I think that the guy holding onto the balloon is very funny. And I just, again, it reinforces the carefreeness of the album, even though he's dead. Like there's still like a happiness, a joy, a space, and he's like floating away. It's not super serious. And I really appreciate that when it comes to his music, because some of his music is very serious.
Yeah.
It's very, very serious. So I like the cover a lot. And yes, this is the one from the previous, let's say, the internet floated version.
I like that they did that. Yeah. To me, I don't know if this is a no skips. I think it's like one of those ones where like it can be a no skips. But is it a traditional skips in the way that we have it? Because I think just from the production and the vibe of this project is very vibey.
Yeah.
Like you can just put it on. But would you say this is a traditional no skip in terms of every song you wouldn't skip?
I say no, because I have in my notes here, I didn't want to kill your vibe because you did like it. Shangri-La, I'm like, Shangri-La, I'm not a big fan of, but Transformations is actually, it's annoying. I just think the voice, the high pitched voice, which is supposed to be like delusional Thomas, it's kind of annoying. I think he had the dark monster, I call it the monster voice, that A$AP Rocky used in his early era of music, and just disavowed it for this very high pitched, very nasally voice for an entire song, and it was not working for me at all.
that could have been left off. Like that's almost barely a song.
Yeah, so that's the only one that I'm like, I really, really don't like. And I'm like, I wrote in my notes, I'm like, yo, this is annoying. So I gotta say no, it's not a no skips.
Yeah, not a no skips for me either. In terms of a score, where are you at with this?
I think, okay. So for Balloonerism by Mac Miller, the late great Mac Miller, I think this is an 8 flat. It just crossed over the line. 8 for me. I think the production is very solid, very good. I think that the lyrics, very meaningful. I love the vibe. I love the childhood. I love the looping back to kids, even if he meant it or not, who knows? But I like that it loops back to kids in like a thematic sense. And I like how like important like it felt like the songs were. It felt like some of the times it felt like he was speaking from beyond the grave, which is just really interesting. And you can only really get that in a posthumous album, but for it to connect in that way, because this was supposed to come out after he's dead.
Yeah,
that was I don't know if that's confirmed, but that was like the rumor is like this album has been sitting on ice since 2014 because it didn't fit the vibe of what he was doing at the time, but it's supposed to come out after he's dead, right? And for it to actually happen, and then for like the lyrics to actually sound like it was purposefully made that way is really interesting. I think my biggest drawback to this is like rapping. I would say like it's when he is trying to rap, or the sections where he's supposed to be rapping, it doesn't rhyme. Like a lot of the times he's not rhyming.
Yeah.
And there are some songs, like I mentioned, Transformations in particular, where I'm like, this is grating. Like, it's annoying. Like, Shangri-La, I can just like take it or leave it. But Transformations in particular, I'm like, this is not good. What about you?
We have the exact same score. I had this as an 8 flat too. Okay. This is a good album. I do think that, again, there are those moments where it's just almost too vibey, and it's like this is the jam session that, like, when you were jamming, it felt very cool and very fun. But after the song is done, it's like, we can do without it. But really like this project. I think this is like probably one of the best mixes of his kind of different sounds and different talents. I still think the ultimate album that's like the mix of the sides of him is Divine Feminine. Okay. That's, to me, the project where you see like the rap and kind of the alternative him meld together. But yeah, good album. Excited we got to finally talk about Mac Miller. I feel like, you know, he's someone who wish we would have had the pod earlier for.
Yeah, me too.
For sure. But I'm happy we got to talk about him. I want to see the Mac Miller fans to come out in droves. Okay, yeah. Get into the comments. Let us know what you guys thought about this project. I'd also want to know what's everyone's favorite Mac Miller project. I'm not actually sure what the consensus is. You know, certain artists have the consensus of what people say their best project is, their favorite project is. With Mac Miller, I have no idea.
Join me in the Kids Brigade, baby. The Kids Brigade.
I would be very surprised because Kids is the most different sounding of all his projects at this point. Because he grew up.
Yeah.
But of course, your body, your choice. If you love Kids, that's fine. We still love you. Make sure you find us on the interwebs at Album Mode Pod on Twitter, Album Mode Pod on Instagram, Album Mode Pod on TikTok. Leave us a rating and a review, 5 stars on a single star less. Please, we need those reviews to get up the rankings, all your podcast platforms. Leave us that rating and review. YouTube, you know where to find us at Album Mode. Like this video, make sure you're subscribed. And please leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. And until next time, know yourself, know your worth.
Later days.